Welcome to Regulate and Rewire, an anxiety and depression podcast where we discuss the things I wish someone would have taught me earlier in my healing journey. I'm your host, Amanda Armstrong, and I'll be sharing my steps, my missteps, client experiences, and tangible research-based tools to help you regulate your nervous system, rewire your mind, and reclaim your life. Thanks for being here. Now let's dive in. Hey friend, welcome back. You've maybe seen on social media, I don't know, maybe you haven't. Maybe your algorithm and mine are distinctly different, but there's a good chance that you have seen that eldest daughters are having a moment online right now, mostly due to Taylor Swift's new album, where she has a song titled Eldest Daughter that for me and many others rang true in a way that was a gut punch. So whether you are a Swiftie, an anti-Swiftie, or you fall somewhere in between, beyond just the trend, there is actually a research-backed pattern that many of us know well as the eldest daughter syndrome, and its deep connection to high-functioning anxiety. Now, as an eldest daughter myself, I know the invisible load of being the oldest. You're the responsible one, the second mom, the example, the one who holds it all together while slowly self-abandoning in the process. And so today we're going to unpack that. And this isn't a story about blame or resentment. Honestly, for me, in hearing that song and processing and prepping for this conversation, for me, it's a story about reckoning. It's a story about the ways that love and responsibility got tangled up really early on for me and how understanding that can help us heal. So whether you are an eldest sibling or not, I think there's going to be something for you in this conversation because either you are one or you know one, and maybe that will help you understand them a little better too. But let's start by talking about the roles that so many of us take on as eldest daughters. And I'm going to invite you throughout this episode to replace when I say that with your thing, eldest sibling as individuals. I'm going to continue to use the term eldest daughter because this is through, and a lot of what I'm going to share is through the lens of my personal lived experience and the role that that played in my anxiety and depression and ultimately my healing as well. I used to wear so many of these roles like a badge of honor, the helper, the dependable one, the example. And honestly, I still value parts of them because these roles gave me leadership skills, capability, the belief that I could handle hard things. And over time, I started to see the cost. Being the one who has it all together taught my body that safety meant control, that worth came through productivity, and value came through keeping the peace and everybody else's needs being taken care of. And that wiring, those parts of me built my hyper-responsible self, my over-functioning, ever-productive self, the one who says, I am fine, while silently unraveling. And I think there's something about being first, especially the first daughter and the societal and familial constructs that often go into that. You're the first to figure things out. You become the kid that no one worries about. You hear things like, you're so mature for your age. You are a pleasure to have in class. So often that these just become who you are. You repress your needs to keep the peace. Oftentimes you start repressing your needs before you actually have the ability to know what they even are. You become type A, a perfectionist. You keep achieving so that nobody can see the chaos that you feel inside. You struggle to ask for help even when you need it. And again, this is what I call that eldest daughter to high functioning anxiety pipeline. And it's very real. And there's a weight to all of these things that I have come to see contributed in a lot of ways to my anxiety and eventually to so much self-abandonment that my depression set in. And in the vein of this conversation, there was a metaphor that I heard recently on another podcast, and I loved it so much. I think I wrote it down almost verbatim, but I did not write down the podcast that I heard it on. So I'm sorry if somebody messages me and tells me what podcast it was on. I will link it in the show notes. But the question that was posed in this podcast was something like, why do you think so many oldest daughters fall into the ambition trap? And the person replied with something called the wolf pack metaphor. And she said, when wolves walk, they walk in a pack. The one in the front understands the assignment. They know that they have to walk at the front. And walking at the front means they are going to take more hits and get more scratches. But the rest of the pack will be more preserved. And I think eldest child syndrome is a lot like that. We understand, or we've been taught, that our role is to walk in front. Maybe we'll take some more hits, but it means that the ones coming behind us can have a better, smoother journey. Now, I don't know how factual this is about wolf behavior, but the point it makes is clear, and it is something that has felt really true to my experience. And I also think a lot of my experience is the reality that I was just doing a lot of things first. So there's often a lack of support, not because people or parents don't want to be there for you or for me, but because you were doing things that they haven't done. They just don't know how to help. So you figure it out. You become resourceful. You become self-reliant. And oftentimes, somewhere along the way, you internalize the message that asking for help isn't really an option. Not because it's forbidden, not because people don't want to help you, but because there isn't always someone there who knows how to do that for you. And then the other layer is that you are the first kid that your parents learned how to be parents on. They will probably mess up, or they probably did mess up on you the most. And I can at least speak from my experience now as a mother. There are things that I did, ways of responding to my oldest, who just happens to be a son, that I won't with my middle or my youngest child. My youngest is just a couple months old, and I am a drastically different mom, even in these newborn first couple month stages. I feel so much more chill than I was with my first newborn. And of course, right? Because it's not my first time anymore. One of the things that I told my husband recently was that I wish I could take like this sense of savoring and calm and like go redo the newborn stage with my older two kids. But the reality is we can't. So is my eldest at higher risk for anxiety because his mom was more anxious with him? Yes. Actually, that is what the data would suggest. The research would indicate that he is. And I can let that knowing make me feel guilty, or simply aware and willing to support him if or when it's needed in that way. And so in summary, from what we've talked about so far, eldest daughters tend to be the third parent, mature for their age, type A. They don't have a lot of needs, or they do a lot of giving. The eldest daughter are often chronically busy, always on the move, high achieving. And one of the things that we do is we mask our emotions in productivity, and we don't share vulnerably because oftentimes we are holding it together for everyone else, or there's just not somebody there who has the ability to help us. And again, this isn't just anecdotal. There is research to back up what so many eldest daughters just instinctively know. Studies consistently, so I'm just going to get nerdy into the research for a couple minutes. Studies consistently show that firstborn and only children, regardless of gender, exhibit higher rates of anxiety compared to those born later. There was one study that involved 182,000 children, and they found that firstborns with siblings were 48% more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety than those born second or later. And researchers theorize this is because, again, first-time parents are often more anxious and restrictive with the older children. And these heightened expectations, the pressure to be the example, to get it right, can often lead to anxiety or perfectionism. And then when you add gender to the equation, there is evidence that consistently shows a higher prevalence of anxiety in females. Globally, women are twice as likely as men to experience anxiety disorders. And so when you combine being the firstborn and being female, you get this compounding effect. And there are some researchers who suggest that firstborn females face kind of this dual challenge, both the parental anxiety from just being a firstborn And then the societal gender expectations, which often leads to earlier parentification, greater restrictiveness, then the term eldest daughter syndrome. So it's not a clinical term, but it's one that just describes that high pressure, that sense of responsibility that many of us feel and often leads to heightened anxiety. And like I've shared, in a lot of ways rings true for my experience. And I think it's important to sidebar maybe a little bit here and talk about how good my childhood was. My childhood was good. My parents are good. And there's still a truth and a weight to parts of my story that need to be acknowledged and healed. And more on that in a little bit. But I want to share with you a gut punch that I got in therapy a couple years ago. So I was building kind of this was actually the first time I had spoken to this therapist, and I was briefly sharing some family history. Now, my mom got really sick when I was 14, and for the next couple years, she did what she needed to survive, and I stepped into a caretaking role for my younger siblings, making sure homework got done, managed schedules. I was the stable one. And at the time, I wore that responsibility with pride. I was capable, I was helping, I was needed. And I was sharing with this therapist a specific day that I remember feeling just the crushing weight of it all. I think I was prepping dinner and it just hit me. So I went upstairs, I turned on the bathroom fan, I locked the door, and I just collapsed to the floor, sobbing. But I only gave myself a few minutes to be in that emotion. And then I distinctly remember I stood up, I splashed water on my face, I reapplied some mascara and concealer so that you couldn't tell that I had cried, and I went back downstairs like nothing had happened. And this therapist asked, when before this moment did you feel like it was up to you to keep everything together? To which I very casually replied, I was like, no, that's it. That's the pivotal moment for me. It's when my mom got sick. It's like this moment. That's where all my trauma started, all of my patterns started, everything. It was that moment. And then this was the gut punch where she just kindly but firmly goes, no, it didn't. Because not all 14-year-olds respond this way to their mom getting. Not all 14-year-olds take it on in that way. This is a pattern that you had long before that happened. And you guys, when I tell you, I was like, no. This was the first 30 minutes of talking to this woman. This was the, are we a good fit for each other session? I hadn't even paid her yet. And she had already broken down, I will tell you in a helpful way, this notion of where my patterns began. And she helped me realize that wasn't where they began. That was just simply where they were reinforced with an exclamation point. And this might not sound like a big deal to you, but this was one of those light switch moments in my healing where a big unraveling was able to happen. And then I got another gut punch a few sessions later, still in that let's get to know your history phase. And I was actually sharing this in the context of how lucky am I that I had such great parents. And I started to share a story to illustrate this, that while my dad worked a lot and he often brought work home, he was also incredibly present. And he showed up for our sports. He was there. And to illustrate this, I was telling her about one night when I was so stressed out about math homework. I had so much pressure on myself to be honestly perfect in every area of my life. Whatever. Math and I, no thank you. Wasn't my favorite subject. And I was crashing out about this math homework. And my dad noticed that I was stressed. And so he pulled out a silly hat, knocked on my bedroom door, and in a silly accent, made this joke and made me laugh. And my dad has this saying that he would say to us often, which was lighten up, Frances, And so I tell this story and I'm like, yeah, see, hard times, parents noticed, they were there, awesome. And my therapist replies, yeah, I'm glad that felt helpful for you in that moment. That's definitely one way to respond. Then she paused and she goes, I'm also curious how it might have felt if instead of showing up with humor, he might have walked in, maybe sat on the bed next to you, gave you a hug, and said something like, hey, I can see that you are carrying so much with mom being sick, your school activities, holding things down at home. Like, I just want you to know that it's not your job to hold it all together. Like, it's mine and I'm here for you. I don't probably have to tell you what happened after that. I, again, started sobbing. I just sobbed. I don't know that my overfunctioning system had ever felt so held and seen and so sad at the same time. That little 14-year-old girl version of me carried all of this so heavily and so alone. And this is not a criticism of my parents or my childhood. My dad's probably going to even listen to this episode. It is an acknowledgement that the best that someone has to offer us might sometimes fall short or off base of what we actually need, what our nervous system needs to feel safe and seen and supported. And we have to feel that. And when needed, we have to heal that mismatch, that misalignment. Because here's what I realized. I can acknowledge that my dad showed up in the best way he knew how, and also acknowledge that there was something I needed that I didn't get. Both can be true. And I think both are often true, especially for eldest siblings. We hold ourselves back from so much healing because we cling to some invisible honor code. At least, again, I will speak for me. I won't speak for you. But I believed that if I admitted that my parents' behavior had hurt me in some way, it was betrayal, that it somehow discounted all of the good that they did. And that's not how this works. It is rarely either or. It is often about thinking it in terms of both and. I had great parents and there was unintentional hurt caused. There was parentification. There was a burden that I carried that should not have been mine. I love being an eldest daughter. I love being the biggest sister, and I'm healing from it. I had a good life and still struggled with anxiety and depression. I can understand why my husband, as a youngest son, doesn't always know how to support me, and it still really sucks sometimes. None of these cancel each other out. None of these things are mutually exclusive. They do not invalidate each other. And not to be cliche in bringing it back to nervous system regulation, but I'm always going to bring it back to nervous system regulation. But it is only when my nervous system started to settle that I could hold this nuance, that I could hold this both and. More of my experience is valid, where I could hold more of that was harmful to me, even if they didn't mean it. It was still harmful, and I have to reckon with that. I carry that. Because when we are dysregulated, when we're stuck in survival mode, our thinking becomes black and white, all or nothing, good or bad. But it's in regulation, it's in this quiet, compassionate honesty that we can hold the complexity. We can honor the good while also grieving what wasn't there for us. And I don't have this figured out. I am very much in the middle of this healing, adding, again, this layer of being married to a youngest son. So while I'm the oldest of 4, he's the youngest of 5, and he often just doesn't get it. Not really. I mean, how could he? He grew up with older siblings who paved the way. He was held differently, probably worried about differently. His experience of family was fundamentally different than mine. And that's heavy sometimes. And there are moments when I still feel the need to hold myself together. When I feel like I'm too much, too big, too intense for the people around me. When I need support but don't know how to ask for it, or it's still in some ways and some situations not available. The support that I need is not available in this family dynamic either. And I think this can be common for eldest daughters who maybe partner with younger siblings to still sometimes experience a disconnect in how you each move through the world. What feels like basic responsibility to you might feel like overfunctioning to them. What feels like normal self-reliance to you reads maybe as distance or not letting them in. You were trained to anticipate needs and scan a room, and oftentimes there isn't that person who is anticipating your needs or scanning your rooms. And then when you enter your healing era where you realize that like you deserve to be heard and seen and held in the same way that you do for others, your partner may suddenly be faced with the reality that they don't know how to do that. And then you're left again without the support that you want and you need. And it's messy and it's real. And it's something that we're still working through, learning each other's patterns, trying to meet somewhere in the middle. And so if that rings true for you, I just want to offer kind of this echoed experience and validation. And one of the other things that I want to touch on is how over comfortable we often become with productivity and how under comfortable we become with rest or play. And for me, I can trace back the moment where I realized that play had become foreign to me. And I think I've shared this story on the podcast before, but here it is again, because it was such a pivotal and clear moment for me. So I was in the beautiful country of Zambia, interacting with the most amazing humans on a humanitarian trip. And one of the days we went to a center that provided a meal and a safe place to be during the day for children who lived in the streets. And we were simply told to go and play with the children. And when it was like, okay, now go, I could feel my whole system just like freeze and locked up. I was like, wait, what? What am I supposed to do? What are the rules? Like what? And I remember looking and I saw a pile of books and I was like, perfect. And I beelined it for the pile of books. I was like, I can do that. I can read. There's a right and wrong way to do that. And then the reading circle turned into a duck, duck, goose circle. And I was like, yeah, okay, great. I know the rules to this. And then mid-game, I heard another volunteer call out for a few more hands to wash dishes after the kids had finished their meal. I quickly got up and I went over. And now this might not sound problematic, and it probably wasn't problematic. Those kids just went right on playing their games without me. But as I took some time later that day and over the next couple days to process that experience, I broke down as I realized how quickly I jumped up and walked away from children who have little to nothing to go do dishes because productivity was more comfortable for me than play. I was sad for them, but in hindsight, I am also so sad for me in some ways too, that play had become something so deeply uncomfortable for me. And I think I lost this carefree play a lot younger than I probably would want for my children to lose it. At some point I decided, or more my system learned, that being helpful mattered more than being carefree. And that is part of this quiet bridge between eldest daughter energy and anxiety, the way that we abandon ourselves in the service of being responsible. And oftentimes it's no one's fault, but the reality remains that far too early, I took on roles that weren't mine. I became the fixer, the stabilizer, the one who made sure everybody was okay, even when I wasn't. And these things fed my anxiety. I've got it, don't worry about me, hold it all together. I learned to not have needs before I even knew what they might be. I stopped playing too early, started managing too soon, and this anxiety that comes from that is real, but so is the healing. And in my own experience, I'm learning that healing this takes a unique kind of holding. It takes somebody who can catch you in the middle of justifying why somebody did something before you sit with the fact that it hurt you, or before you acknowledge that what they did was just crappy. It takes a certain kind of holding and someone to call out when you have given someone else the grace that often is not offered back to you. It takes someone to hear you tell the story and just to pause and to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that they didn't acknowledge this. I'm sorry that they left you in that emotion alone. And to be able to feel, and I will tell you, the first couple times that happened, my instinct is be like, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And I can share from an experience because my therapist is incredible at holding this space for me right now. And she's like, no. It wasn't okay. And it's not okay. And I'm sorry. And she just holds that witnessing space until my system goes, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I'm also, like I've mentioned, I'm learning how to heal a lot of this within my own motherhood, learning how to play again every single time that I step away from a sink full of dirty dishes to sit down on the floor and play duck, duck, goose or chase my kid down the hall. I feel something mend. And for me, I have 2 older sons and a youngest daughter. My daughter was born just a couple months ago. And as I looked at her, one of those first couple days, I teared up and I cried, realizing, or at least hoping, that her experience could be a little bit different, softer maybe. She's the baby of our family with 2 big brothers. Maybe she'll have more space to play, to be messy, to not carry everybody's everything. And she'll have her own heart, of course. Every position in birth order likely comes with its own challenges, but her weight won't be the same as mine. And that feels incredibly healing for me in some ways. And then with my oldest, my sweet, sweet son, I am so conscious of these patterns. I watch for signs that he's taking on too much, being too responsible, abandoning his own needs to care for his siblings, because I want him to be considerate of others. Again, remember, I took on these roles and I cherish a lot of what it gave me. I want him to have leadership skills and the capability. I want him to know that he can handle things. I want him to be considerate of other people without the crushing weight of over responsibility. I want all of my kids to know you don't have to hold it all together. You don't have to be an example. You are allowed to need support. You are allowed to be messy and unsure and not have things figured out. And that is the gift that I'm trying to give them, the gift that I am still learning as an eldest daughter to give myself. And in some ways, it feels like a circle completing itself, if you will, where awareness becomes choice, where I get to model something new, responsibility that isn't self-abandonment, empathy that doesn't require exhaustion, leadership that includes rest and play. And if you have listened this far through my basically verbalized journal entry of an episode, then I want to make sure that I leave you with some practical steps for healing. So what does it look like when you are an eldest daughter carrying this weight? And I am going to offer 5 or 6 just recommendations, suggestions, take what you will. First is to name the pattern. Recognize it. You cannot heal what you don't acknowledge. I want you to say it out loud. I learned to be hyper responsible. I learned to put everybody else's needs first. I learned that my worth comes from what I do, not who I am. I took on too much too soon. And then second, practice the both and. Maybe your parents did their best and you needed something different. Maybe your partner doesn't get it and your experiences and your needs are still valid. And you deserve to feel held in it, even if they can't be the one to do it. You are capable and you need support. You can handle things and you don't always have to. And then third, learn to regulate your nervous system because when you are chronically dysregulated, you cannot access the nuance and self-compassion needed for this work. So use the tools that we talk about in all of the other episodes. Assessing your stress load, breath work, movement, vagal toning, grounding practices, get coaching, get therapy. You've got to have those tools in those daily moments, but we also have to do that deeper work. Fourth is to experiment with asking for help. This may feel deeply uncomfortable. Find a place where it is available because it very genuinely might not be available to you everywhere. Start small. Ask for something that's low stakes. Notice what comes up. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's discomfort. Maybe it's this voice that says you should just do it yourself. That's the pattern. And you get to choose something different. You get to choose to create different experiences for yourself where you ask for help and help is available or help is offered. And you start to experience and learn something new. Or maybe, so this is, that was 4A, this is 4B. Maybe instead experiment with just letting things go undone or do less. So maybe if you don't ask for help, then just do less. I have started to ask myself pretty regularly, what would doing this just barely good enough look like? What would parenting just barely good enough today look like? What would cleaning the kitchen or doing the laundry just barely good enough today look like? And it's such a verbose question that I have to laugh at it, but it does help me recalibrate away from my overfunctioning patterns and my perfectionist patterns. My fifth suggestion is to play more, is to rest more, even if it is just 1% more. You have to show your system that your worth is not tied to your output, because your nervous system's not going to believe that until you've experimented and seen that play and rest are survivable, that you can walk away from dirty dishes and play with your kid and you don't get in trouble for it. And maybe on this, go listen to my past podcast on productivity-based self-worth. If you've gotten this far, that's probably one that you'll resonate with as well. And finally, if you have kids, you get to heal in part because you break the cycle. Let them see you ask for help. Let them see you rest. Let them know that being responsible doesn't mean that you carry everything alone. And as you step out of these patterns of overfunctioning, as your nervous system learns safety again, you will find more spaces and places and experiences for play and softness and joy and all of the other parts of you that got set aside too early, maybe like me. All right, here are your 3 takeaways. Number 1, the eldest daughter to high functioning anxiety pipeline is real. Research shows that firstborn siblings are 48% more likely to struggle with anxiety. It's real. It's real, and so is the healing. Number 2 is that healing often happens in the both and. You can love your role and grieve the cost of it. I cherish being a big sister, and I'm healing from the weight of it. You had good parents, and you experienced unintentional hurt. And it's when your nervous system settles that you can gain the capacity to hold both of these truths without invalidating the other. And number 3 is that healing requires reclaiming play and rest. Far too many of us stopped playing and started managing way too early. I am telling you, it's not mindset work. It's not even nervous system regulation work exclusively. I mean, I guess play and rest under the regulated living theory is part of regulating your nervous system. You have to learn to play again. That is a biological imperative. Play and rest. All right. That's what I have for you today. Thank you for coming on this eldest daughter journal entry of an episode with me. Thank you. If this resonated, maybe share it with another eldest daughter or a sibling. And as always, thank you for being here. And until next week, I am sending so much hope and healing your way. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Regulate and Rewire podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review to help us get these powerful tools out to even more people who need them. And if you yourself are looking for more personalized support in applying what you've learned today, consider joining me inside Rise, my monthly mental health membership and nervous system healing space, or apply for our one-on-one anxiety and depression coaching program, Restore. I've shared a link for more information to both in the show notes. Again, thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.